This
everyone.
conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, and this is Marcy Kinter, the chair of the SGP Technical Committee. Welcome to the last in our series on our deep dive webinars for this year on our new audit templates. I'm pleased to introduce to you Dave Brewer with Image Options, who will be moderating our session today. If you do have any questions at any time about this program or any others or any other issues associated with SGP certification, please go ahead and enter them into our chat box, and we will go ahead and answer those at the end of the program. Dave.
Well, I want to welcome everyone who's joined, and thank you for joining. And we will have a deep dive on the new audit templates. This will be presented by our lead auditor of SGP, Wendy Naden. She has been doing this for about 12 plus years of auditing and being involved. And welcome, Wendy.
Thank you, Dave, and welcome everybody to the session this afternoon. So what I'm going to talk about today is talk about the audit process overall, and the new SGP audit templates that you can find on the impact tracker in the section for each of the relevant audits. So, for example, if you're looking for the health and safety regulatory compliance audit template, you will find that in the health and safety audit section of the impact tracker. If you're looking for the SMS audit template, you will find that in the impact tracker under the SMS audit section where you would upload the completed documents. Marcy's already covered this, so input them at any time, and I will answer, or Marcy will answer them, or Dave will answer them at the end of the session. We have allowed some time for questions. So what I'd like to do first is talk about the audit process. I think sometimes when facilities are provided with a template, the facilities automatically jump to that template and they just start working away and filling out the template. They kind of jump through a few steps without really planning the overall process. So the audit process, this is the checking stage of the plan, do, check, act annual cycle. This is where you take a look at the activities you've done and you assess them to see, how well have we done? What opportunities are there here to improve what we're doing? So the more you put into this activity, the more you're going to get out of it. If you really drill down deeply and look at the details and follow the thread of the documents to see where they take you, the more opportunity you're going to find for the ways that you can do things better. So this is a value add to your process. This isn't intended to be a process where you look to find fault, to blame people because they've forgotten to do something, didn't do it very well. This is an opportunity to identify, hey, we've done this well, but you know what, we can do this a little bit better. And my motto is be fearless. Just keep asking questions and drilling down. And don't be afraid if you're going to find that something hasn't been done, because that's what you want to find out, because that's where the value is to this audit. So to me, if I see an audit report that the conclusion at the end of the whole process says everything is fine, no recommendations, no findings, my reaction to that is, I wonder how hard you really looked and how much effort did you put into that, because that doesn't add any value to your process. Could be true, but I ask questions. When I see that, I think, man, maybe you need to do a bit of a better job. So what it is not. And an audit is not an exercise where you check boxes. It's not a yes, no. Do we have an air permit? Check the box, yes. That's not an audit. It's not, as I've already mentioned, a chance to go looking for problems and then to blame people when things haven't get done, because pretty quickly you're going to lose any cooperation from people and they're not going to provide any more information than what you directly ask for them. And as I've already mentioned, it's not an opportunity to, give yourselves a big pat on the shoulder and say, yes, everything's fine and dandy and no findings at all. No value to that exercise at all. So the audit process, how should the audit process roll out? So there should be an objective. So for example, it will be to assess compliance with environmental regulations. And then you need to define the scope. So what is the scope of this audit going to be? So the scope of an environmental compliance audit, for example, will be to look at compliance with all the regulations that apply to our facility. So the first thing you need to do is to create a list of environmental regulations that apply. So this is already on the impact track. You're already required to do this. So that is in the annual report. Under the environmental audit, you are required to upload a list of the regulations. So that is part of the planning process for the audit. And then based on that list of regulations, so federal, state, provincial, and municipal, based on those regulations, then drill down into those and find out, so for example, for air permitting, what do these regulations say we need to do? If we need an air permit, if we have potential to emit more than 2,000 pounds of VOCs per year, for example, that's your criteria, then you need to go and look for evidence as to whether you exceed that criteria or not. Next thing you need to do, having created that checklist for all of the regulations, so for air, for water, for hazardous waste, if you've got an emergency generator, for example, you need to select an auditor. So again, you need to have an individual who has some knowledge and experience of how to complete an audit, but also who has knowledge of the regulations and the requirements of the regulations, and who understands all the processes within your facility. So that might be a tall order internally. So you could consider looking for an external auditor, or if there are knowledge gaps for somebody internally, then maybe that individual just needs to go and get some more training or needs to do research to become a little bit more knowledgeable about what the environmental regulations are. But again, if you have an auditor that doesn't have the knowledge of what they're looking for and how to look for it, it's very unlikely that your audit is going to be very meaningful. Once it comes to starting the audit, now you've got your checklist, you know what you're looking for, you've selected your auditor. Now you're actually going to go and perform the audit. What you're doing is you're collecting evidence. So that criteria again, if you require an air permit, if you have potential to emit VOCs more than 2,000 pounds per year, you're going to look for evidence to see whether you've actually gone through that exercise or not, to see whether you exceed that limit, and then whether you actually have that permit or not. So you'll be looking for documents in this particular incident that I've talked about. It could also be observations. So for example, if it's for hazardous waste and you are auditing the satellite collection area, you will go and you will look at that area to see if it meets the requirements for that type of collection area. And then also you might talk to folks who handle the hazardous waste, for example, to see how they actually do that. So one of those three methods, or all three of those methods, you will use to collect evidence, and then you will capture the evidence that you find and you'll write it in a report. So this is the entire audit process. So this is what you should be going through for the health and safety regulatory compliance audit, for the environmental audit, and for the SMS audit. It should be this process. Okay, so what does a successful audit look like? So a successful audit has an accurate, detailed checklist to follow. So it shouldn't be that you're wandering around the plant just looking at things and, oh, just happenstance, oh, look, here's a container that contains hazardous waste. Oh, what does it look like? Has it a label? You have a checklist and you are looking for very specific things, and you're looking for evidence to collect and to document on that checklist. If you're successful, you'll allow enough time to follow the evidence to capture for each of the requirements in the checklist. So for example, to complete an environmental regulatory compliance audit, you're not going to be able to do that in 30 minutes. You have to allow enough time to be able to find the documents, to walk around the facility and look at things and to interview people as you need in order to get through all of that checklist. So it could take you, a day to complete a successful audit. And so you need to make sure for your facility, it depends how big you are, it depends how complicated you are, but you have to allow enough time to complete this exercise successfully. A successful audit will document the evidence that you find and what you don't find. So if you find that you have hazardous waste containers that aren't labeled, then you will actually write that in your audit report that on the day of the audit, there were 3 drums of waste hazardous material in the satellite collection area in the press department that had no labels. You will write that into your audit report. And then once you've done that for every single item on your checklist, you'll collect together all the items that you found that need to be addressed and put them on a summary page of corrective actions and opportunities for improvement, because that is going to be the list of things that you are now going to create action items for, and they're going to follow up to make sure that they've been addressed. This audit also needs to be signed by the auditor that completed it, and it needs to have a date on it so that you know when it was completed. This is what a successful audit will look like. So the SGP templates. You do not have to use the SGP templates. These are provided if you don't already have a process yourself, and if you don't have a process, they're to get you started to show you the kind of templates that you need to complete a successful audit. So if you have a third party that comes in and does your regulatory compliance audits for you, that's fine. They can use whatever format they wish, provided it follows the audit process that I've already described. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the SMS Audit Template. So the SMS audit is the activity that you would do at the end of the year, the very last activity, apart from management review. So this is the audit where you'll look at everything in your sustainability management system, compare it to the SGP certification criteria, look for evidence that you've completed all of those activities in the year, and document it, and then identify where are the gaps and the opportunities for improvement. So the audit checklist is based on the SGP certification criteria. So all of the SGP criteria have a number. Each section is numbered. So the audit checklist, the template, has that reference in the checklist to the criteria. So if you wish to see where it comes from, then you can make that reference back to the certification criteria. So this SMS audit template, this is an internal audit that your facility will do every year, and it mirrors the third-party SGP certification audit that's done every 2 years. So that's your external auditor completes an audit of your SMS. So what you're doing is duplicating that internally and doing an internal look at your process and your system. This template should be used as is. It doesn't need any customization. If, however, there are sections in the audit template that don't apply to you, for example, there are sections in there for chemical management for lithoprinting. If you have no lithoprinting in your facility, then you can just write in that section, NA not applicable. Same thing, if you've got no screen printing, you can just put NA not applicable to you. But it shouldn't be modified. Don't edit it and take sections out. So this is a screenshot of the very first section in that SMS audit template. So this is what it looks like. So if you go and download that audit template from the impact tracker, this will be on the first page. So it's laid out so that the checklist, it lays out what the SGP requirement is. It tells you what you need to look for, and then there is a section under that for you to document what your findings are. So this particular section that I'm showing you here is about the policy. So the requirement is it has to be written, and it has to have a number of inclusions in the wording for that policy, and it also has to be publicly available. So what you're doing, you're checking all of these things. Do we have a written policy? Is it signed by a senior manager? Is it dated? And does it have these statements in the policy? And you write your findings in here. So yes, the policy is written. It complies with points A to F. And we share it on the internet. We post it in the lobby. And we include it in conversations with our stakeholders. For example, you would capture that in the finding section. And then based on your findings, does your facility meet this requirement, yes or no? So if you substantially meet the requirements, then yes. If you substantially don't meet all of these listed requirements, it's a no. That would be a corrective action, and you collect those all together in a summary page for action once you've completed the audit. Next item here is about the Sustainability Committee, and again, it will describe what all the activities should be. You will look for evidence that the Sustainability Committee meets all of these requirements. You'll document what you find, and then based on what your findings are, you decide, yes, are we substantially meeting this, or no, are we substantially not? What you shouldn't be doing is looking at the requirements for the policy and automatically checking that yes/no box. That is not how this works. First, you document your findings, and then you decide, based on what you've written in that box, is that a yes or a no? That is how you use this audit report. So if, as an SGP auditor, for example, I come into your facility and I see an SMS audit report and all there is in there is checked yes or no boxes, I am going to make that a finding that you haven't adequately completed an SMS audit because you haven't documented any of your findings that support how you determined yes or no you're compliant with this requirement. And I think that's just what I have described there. The environmental audit, so this is likely the toughest one, mostly because the template that SGP has developed cannot be customized to every facility because there are different regulations, different environmental regulations based on location. So, for example, California is going to have very different environmental regulations than Nova Scotia. So the template that SGP has provided, there's a US version and there's a Canadian version. It will list for the US version, for example, it will list all the federal requirements, but we can't possibly list all the different combinations of the state requirements. So what you will need to do is you will need to take that basic template, look at the federal requirements, go look up for your state, determine what the state requirements are and compare them to the federal requirements. Sometimes they mirror them. Sometimes they're pretty much the same. Sometimes they're different. So if they're different from the federal regulations that are laid out there, then you'll need to go through those regulations and figure out what do they say. So then you will need to customize the environmental audit template then to add the state regulations to that template. So that sounds pretty complicated. So here I've got a screenshot of what that environmental template, SGP environmental template, looks like. So this is an Excel file, and it's not particularly visible, but along the bottom you can see there are different tabs. So they are the different topics, I'm going to call them. So the one that you can see now is on the tab called air. So these are all the requirements for air permitting. So you can see in red, we've tried to make it very clear that you need to check your state requirements for an air permit. So there are some examples that are given here for state regulations, which are fairly typical, but we don't know which state you're in and exactly what you like. So your state may or may not be similar to what we've listed here. So you need to look it up. So generally speaking now, you can just Google whichever state you're in an air permit, and it will take you directly to the page, and then it will give you the guidance and the requirements for permitting in your state. And usually there are links in there to the regulations as well. So if you have to do that research, it's not typically that hard to do it. It sounds overwhelming, but the states have got their website set up pretty well so that you can go in there and you can get that information yourself. So this is set up the same way as the SMS audit template, really. I've cut it off on the right here. So it's set up with whatever the regulation is, and then you list in here what the required action is, and then on the right, there is a cell where you capture your findings. So for example, if this was your state reg and it happened to be accurate, so your VOC total must be less than or equal to 13.4 tons per year, then you would go and look, have we done these calculations? Have we calculated what our potential to win is on an annual basis? And if you have, you document that you've captured this in an Excel spreadsheet, for example, and that our VOC total emissions per year are calculated at 9 tons. So therefore, we are below the threshold requiring a permit. That is the evidence that you will capture in this Excel spreadsheet. That is what this audit does, is that you're looking for what the requirements are and you're capturing what you've done, and then you determine whether you're in compliance or not. And then for each of the tabs on this Excel spreadsheet, you will go through each of the tabs with the information that's here. You'll customize it for the state regulations, and then you'll go and look for the evidence that you're in compliance with each of these regulations. I'm just going to go back a bit because I skipped over them to get to the actual Excel spreadsheet. So there are 13 tabs for different topics. Some of those topics may not apply to you. For example, there is a tab for emergency generators. So if you don't have an emergency generator in your facility, then that topic won't apply to you. And there is at the very beginning a summary page for findings. So for example, if you're looking through the air permitting and there's part of that you determine that you haven't completed, you can capture that on a summary page so that you can then go back and action that item to make sure that you bring yourself into compliance with, for example, air permitting requirements. So for the audit, for the environmental audit, it is critical that you make that checklist accurate for your facility. There is a bit of work that you have to do, which is why I said the environmental one is the toughest. There are resources to help you do that. As I've mentioned, pretty much all the states have pretty comprehensive websites now that give you that information. You can reach out to your regulatory authorities to ask them if you need some clarification about what the requirements are. But that is the hardest part of the environmental audit, is to make sure you have an accurate checklist to begin. Okay, if we've got through the environmental audit, we've done the hard part. Health and safety is generally pretty standardized. There might be a few topics that are customized by state or by province, but generally speaking, lockout, tagout is lockout, tagout. The principles are the same wherever you are. Hazard communication is hazard communication. We call it WMIS or SIMDUT in Canada, but pretty much it is more standardized. So SGP, again, has developed a health and safety audit template, which is based on topics. Again, it is an Excel checklist, and so there are tabs for each topic. And this one is the US one, so this has got all the federal requirements in it. And this one that I'm showing you here is for injury and illness. So every facility needs to complete all these activities. So it lists for you here, this is your checklist. Here is what you need to go and look for evidence for. Do we have an OSHA form 300? And do we have, do we fill those out within 7 days? Do we have a process for completing this within 7 days for every injury and illness? And you'll capture it here. Yes, these get reported into the plant supervisors, and they keep the forms and blah, 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 whatever you find. Do we have a form 300A? Yes, we have them posted every year on the main bulletin board outside the cafeteria. Those are the kinds of findings that you would capture when you're looking for evidence for health and safety compliance. And as I said, there are topics along the bottom. Again, so some of these topics might not apply to you. For example, if you don't have any confined spaces in your facility, that won't apply to you. If you don't use temporary workers, that won't apply to you, for example. So again, you can just utilize this template and figure out which ones do apply to you and which ones don't. Again, it has a findings tab at the beginning. So as you're going through, and once you've collected all your evidence, if you find there are gaps or things that you haven't done, collect those all together and transfer them onto the tab at the very beginning, because that's your action item list of things you need to address once the audit is completed. So in summary, the process is, in order to be successful, you need to have a competent auditor. So a competent auditor is somebody that understands the audit process, which is what I've just described, that you have a checklist, that you're looking for evidence, that you have completed all the activities on your list. You document that evidence and you produce a report. Your checklist is accurate. You have checked that against current regulations at the state, at the federal and the local level, and that you are completely documenting your findings on that audit report. So that is the process that you need to go through. So I'm just going to throw it out there now for any questions that you might have, either on the audit process, any of that, or on the templates, or even on the impact tracker, which is where all of these audit reports will be uploaded when you've completed them.
So Wendy, this is Marcy. Whoa. Okay, so I do have a question. We need to, what is the one major, I guess, faux pas that you find, or the most common problem you find when you go out to audit facilities regarding the use, the facilities conducting their environmental or their safety and health audits? What is the one big issue that you see that has been common over the years that you have been auditing facilities?
I think the biggest issue that I've seen is that whoever's taken on the responsibility of completing the audit, the auditor, sometimes doesn't have all the knowledge they need to actually complete the audit report, to complete the audit. So they've said, hey, go and complete this audit. And they understand that maybe they've got some knowledge gaps, but they push ahead anyway and try and complete the audit. So when it comes to using the checklist, if there's something there they don't understand, they'll just skip over it. So my recommendation is, if you're doing that audit and if you don't understand, for example, the air permitting regulations, there's no way to get around that. You need to go and research a little bit to understand what the requirements are and how they apply to your facility. I don't know what all the state requirements for the air permits are. I have to go online to look them up and to figure them out myself. So that's the process that I go through. It does take a little bit of time to do that, but that is the only way that you can, as an auditor, determine whether or not your facility is in compliance with those state regulations. So there really aren't any shortcuts to doing this regulatory compliance audit, because otherwise it just becomes an exercise in, well, I don't really know, but I'm going to guess that we're too small and our emissions are too low, that we don't need a permit, so I'm just going to assume and hope that we don't need to do it. That's not a regulatory compliance audit. You're flying on a wing and a prayer there and just hoping that that's the right answer, and short-circuiting all the bit in between, which is collecting the evidence and being able to show that the evidence you've got supports compliance. You can't short-circuit that bit. And I understand that there's work in that and it makes it difficult. So it might well be that you have to reach out to a third-party consultant or reach out to an industry association or somebody that has that knowledge. But that's the process that you need to go through.
Great. Yes, that's what I find as well. Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
My question to Wendy is, the templates, we have new V4 requirements, and if you're looking for those, they will be where?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Where are these templates?
Yes.
So the templates for these three templates, so the SMS audit, the health and safety audit, and the environmental compliance audit are all on the impact tracker. On the internal verification tab, I hate that term, but we couldn't think anything better. In your annual report, if you open that up, there will be a line item there for environmental audit. If you open that up, there will be on the left-hand side, there'll be a little click box where there is a template that you can download for the audit report. That's also the spot where you would upload the list of the environmental regulations that apply to your facility, and in that exact same section, after you've downloaded the audit report, you've completed your audit, and once it's complete, then you would upload it all in that same section called environmental audit. And similarly for health and safety audit, they're all there. That's where you upload your list of health and safety regulations that apply. And then you can download the template, and then when it's complete and you've got the completed audit report, you upload it all into that same section. And there is also guidance in that section too. So in addition to the templates, there is also the individual guidance just for that section on completing the audit. You can also find the guidance in that section.
Any other questions or comments? Boy, it's a quiet group.
If when you actually come to complete your audit and you've downloaded these templates and you've had a look at them and you've done your best to customize them and it's a bit of a holy cow moment, I can provide a certain amount of support for you to help you out. You know, if you want to ask, you know, is this the list of regulations? Hey, does this look okay, Wendy? Here's how I've taken those regulations and here's how I've put it in the template. I can help you a bit with that too. I can't do your audit for you, but I can give you some feedback and to some help if you're looking even to where to go to get this information. So on an ongoing basis, it looks easy, or maybe it doesn't look easy when I'm describing it, but when you actually come to do it yourself, that's kind of when the rubber hits the road, and sometimes that's when you have the questions that you want to ask. So by all means, feel free to contact me at the time when you're actually trying to use these templates and get this audit done. The good news is, though, once you've customized that template and once you've got that detailed checklist, it's a one-time deal, other than keeping on top of things, because regulations do change, but not nearly as much as getting that checklist to start with, the environmental one. And then after that, you're just going through that exercise another time. So the next time you do the exercise, you're already pretty much good to go, and it's a lot easier the next time. The health and safety one doesn't need so much customization. It's really just the environmental one, I think, which is a bit indigestible the first time around.
Okay, any other questions? Well, thank you, Wendy. I do know that there are those in the community that do find some of these audits quite daunting, but I believe once you go through it once, then you do feel that you do have a stronger knowledge base from which to work. I do want to announce and for everyone to watch their email boxes. SGP will be announcing a 10-part Sustainability Foundation series based on the concept of environmental social governance, as well as taking a look at carbon footprinting, your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And for our community members, we will be hosting a webinar coming up soon on the use of the tracker to actually calculate your emissions, your scope 1, 2, and then we're hoping to be able to launch a new part of our tracker that will allow you to calculate your scope 3 emissions. So we're quite excited about how the SGP program is moving forward and keeping in line with what is being asked for by the customer base, as well as how to help the SGP community take a look at its carbon footprint and take a look at how it can start to incorporate carbon reductions. So we're quite excited about our upcoming webinar programs, as well as our refinements to our impact tracker. So are there any further questions or any last minute questions? Okay, with that, we will close out our deep dive webinar for today. Please watch for it. It will be posted up on the SGP website within the next week or so, and you can tell your colleagues about it. So thank you very much, and thank you again, Wendy and Dave.
Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, talk to everyone soon. Bye.